Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Goaltending, where your why is bigger than your excuses. I'm your host, Will Bland, and today is a very exciting episode. First off, you just have me. We're going to do a Q&A episode today where I respond to some questions and a few topic points that people have brought up in conversation with me since starting the podcast. But before we dive into the topic of discussion today, I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in and allowing me to be a part of your journey. Today is a special milestone for the podcast. Now, I didn't communicate this out loud publicly, but going into creating the podcast, I set a goal of producing 12 episodes in 2023. Today is episode 12, and we are in July. I'm so excited that I accomplished this goal so quickly. And I think there's a couple of learning points to take away from it. So I wanted to bring it up. I wanted to celebrate it with you all because you are a part of this journey. And I would not be here if it weren't for your support, for you reaching out and joining the conversation, and for you letting me know that it is adding value to your lives. So I appreciate everybody who's reached out, been involved, commented, joined the conversation. So thank you very much. Now, the learning points to take away from that is, first off, I may have set the goal a little short. I set the goal for 12. I'm already at 12 in July. So did I make the goal too easy? Maybe. Here's what I want to point out about that. I encourage you to set big goals. It's great to set your goals very high because if you fall short, you still made a lot of great progress. If you fail, you have some great learning points that you can take away from it. But I encourage big goals. Now, the reason that I set my goal at 12 is I wanted to do one episode a month. And the reason that I set it a little bit shorter than what I've been able to take on is because there were a lot of unknown variables in planning for this. So to preface that, I have never operated a podcast before. I've never been on a podcast episode before this. And have really only had a couple of acquaintances and friends that have been involved with the podcast in any way prior to that I had brief conversations with, but I still knew very little about. So I recognized that there was a very big learning curve for me. And so in order to ensure that I'm producing the best quality possible, I wanted to keep it to one a month so that I could focus on quality and learning. And what I have found since starting is that just doing it has been the greatest teacher. The experience of doing the podcast, of learning how to edit, of how to promote it, of setting things up on the website. Not things that I knew already, but I've been able to learn as I go. And so it really draws a lot of attention to the last step of the goaltending process, and that is review and refine. So within a month or two, I realized I can take on more than this without sacrificing the balance that I want and the other priorities of my life. I was like, I can squeeze another episode in each month and be able to do 2 a month. So I quickly realized that I adjusted my processes and got to where I'm now producing 2 episodes a month instead of what I initially planned for, which was 1. Now, I could have stuck with just doing 1 episode a month, but then I would have been selling myself short. So I did set my goal short, but that does not mean that I have to perform short. Part of reviewing and refining is, hey, maybe I hit that goal quicker than I thought I was going to. It doesn't mean that's the end of the line. That leads to more goals. So the next thing for me is to set new goals for the rest of the year, for the rest of 2023, and really drive this in the direction that I want it to go. So I want to recognize that milestone today, share those takeaways, and really just thank you all for being a part of the journey, sharing your feedback, sending questions in, and joining the conversation. Thank you so much. Now I want to get into a really difficult to discuss topic. It's an emotional topic, but I think there's so much value behind it. So it started with me posting a social media post talking about the relationship with my mother. And it impacted several people. There were several people that had comments, and even some people who reached out privately with questions in regards to toxic parenting relationships that they had, and just asking questions about what I went through, how I handled certain situations. And it made me realize the value in having the conversation publicly, because it's hard to have. First off, I want to preface the intent here is not to be disrespectful in any way toward my mother. Uh, she is the person who gave me life. I would not be here if it were not for her. And I will forever be grateful for that. But it is important to address the toxicity in the relationship, to talk about it, to talk about my story, so that hopefully you can find some relation points so that you are able to assess and address whatever kind of toxic relationships it is that you are dealing with, because I know there are a lot more people out there going through it. It's just hard to talk about. And then once again, it got brought up again on episode 11 as I spoke with Amber Jones. And so with that, I said, I need to have a conversation about this. So I hope you all take something away. If you do find it useful, please share it. Please like it. Please leave a comment, a review, join the conversation. It's very helpful. So for me, I became used to dysfunction. I didn't necessarily have like a normal life growing up. So my mom was married 4 times. She married my dad twice. And then I had 2 stepfathers along the journey. But that was not the problem. There are specifics that I won't get into because, like I said, the intent is not to disrespect. I'm not going to badmouth my mom. That's not the intent here. So I want to give a broad overview of the later part of my life, as the later adolescence, basically. And I cut my mom out of my life. She's no longer a part of mine and my family's life at my decision. And it was not an overnight decision. It came with years of dead-end conversations, of trying to talk about how I felt, how actions in the relationship were impacting me and my family negatively. And so I tried to approach the conversation from several different angles, and to provide an opportunity to change the behavior, to change how things were going so that we could improve the relationship. That was the intent. That's what I wanted. And so I want to point out, if you have the opportunity to communicate, to have some hard conversations, but you're both willing to communicate and make some adjustments, please do that. Please try to amend and fix the relationship if you can. I want you to know that I'm not encouraging you to cut a family member out, to cut a parent out of your life. If it's possible to amend that relationship, I will always recommend that route first. But after several years of having a very, very similar conversation, of saying the same things over and over again with no change in actions, it got more and more draining and having a negative emotional impact on not only myself, but my wife and my kids. And so I reached a point that a hard line was crossed. There was a moment of disrespect between my mom and my wife, and because of that was the last straw to break the camel's back. That's what pushed me over the line. And so I sent one final message, and that was to express that she would no longer be a part of our lives, the reason why, the reiteration of the previous conversations that we'd had. And after sending the message, expressing how I felt, why I felt that way, and that the relationship would be no more, I sent that message. I uh, blocked and removed my mom, uh, phone number, social media, any forms of communication. Excuse me. There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot of takeaways. And there are pieces of this that I want to point out things from this story. The way that I responded to things, why I responded that way, so that hopefully you can learn something that might be able to help you if you are going through a similar situation of any kind, whether it be a parent or just a family member or a close friend in general. And so the first thing that I want to bring up is this decision will impact other relationships if you have to remove a person from your life because of the toxicity. So the first thing that you have to consider is for us, it was this is going to impact other family members and it's going to impact holidays. We get together on holidays several times a year, and typically it's all together. And so now it required setting clear boundaries with family members so that they understood our position, the reason that I chose to remove mom from our lives, and to ask for them to respect that decision. And I want to point out that respect does not mean that they have to agree with it. So, an example is the first year after making that decision, removing my mom from our lives, we went to Christmas that year and communicated that if mom was going to be there, we did not want to be. And so we clearly communicated a timeline for us to be there without her. And toward the end of that family visit, my mom shows up while we're still there. And we quickly gathered our things and left, and was very upset and hurt at the situation because we communicated that we did not want her to be around. And so this was an opportunity for us for Brittany and I to communicate together on how we felt and how we wanted to address the situation. And what we came up with is we're going to sit down with my mama and my aunt, the two primary people who plan the holiday get-togethers, and we're going to have a conversation about our boundaries, why we feel that way, and set a boundary with them of if this situation happens again, we will no longer come around because we don't want to be in that situation. And so we asked my mama and my aunt to come out. We sat down and we explained the whole situation. Everything that's happened, the reason that I made the decision to remove my mom from our lives, and to inform them that we did not want to be around if she was going to be there. Now, we were happy to communicate and to make other plans so that we could still see each other, especially around holidays. But ultimately, it was about setting a clear and firm boundary and sticking to it. So I want to point that out as a first lesson is you have to set the boundary and you have to hold firm to your boundary, and that is to respect yourself. So make sure that you are clear and understand the reason for your boundary and enforce it. Otherwise, people will try to push the line. People will try to cross that line because even though we decided to remove my mom from our lives, it doesn't mean that they agree with it. They still have a relationship with my mom. They may think that it's in our best interest to improve the relationship. And so they may try to cross that boundary if we are not firm with it. So I just want to point out how important it is to be clear on the boundary, stay firm to the boundary. Then you also have to consider other relationships. There was a big why, a big driving factor to why I made the decision to remove my mom from our lives, and that is to protect my wife and kids from the negative emotions. it's something that I didn't want in my life, but I've been used to it. It's something that I grew up around, so it was not foreign to me. And that's sad to hear. It's sad to say, but it is something that I can manage myself because I was used to it. But my wife and my kids, they didn't deserve to have that around. I didn't want that around them. I didn't want to have to explain those situations and those emotions to my kids either. Um, and so part of the decision was about protecting my family and not just about myself. I also want to bring up that it would have been harder to make this decision if I didn't have some other example relationships in my life. So, first, it started with having some friends during childhood who, specifically, I had a friend who I was friends with from elementary school all the way through high school, even went to college together for a period of time. And I was very close with him and his family. And so there were weekends I would stay over there, and it was a very different environment. Now, as a kid, you might be around that and not really understand the difference in the environment other than it's different. So I liked being over there. I didn't fully understand why until I got older and I realized that it's because the way that they operated was different. And then I also was exposed to that even more when I met my wife and became exposed to her family and the way that they operated, the way that they expressed love and communicated. And it showed me a different way. So that built a new level of self awareness and helped me understand that the environment I was around was dysfunctional, that there was a lot of negative emotions derived from it, that I did not have to continue to allow that to be what my life was. And I didn't have to continue to allow it to impact my life. And I do want to say thank you to my father-in-law as being a driving factor in teaching me that, because he actually went through some difficulties himself with his family, and he shared the book Boundaries with me when he saw that I was going through that struggle. And so that book helped open my eyes to understanding boundaries and learning to get clear about my boundaries and set them and respect myself and hold firm to those boundaries. So I want to give a thank you to him for helping me realize that, which helped me get to this place where I feel so much better and I no longer have that negative emotional energy that's draining and impacting my life. After I shared the social media post about cutting my mother out of my life, I had a friend reach out who was going through a somewhat similar situation, different yet still dealing with a toxic relationship with a parent. And one of the biggest concerns that they had was, if I cut them out, I lose other relationships in my family. That is a difficult situation to deal with. And what I would offer for consideration is that you have to make a decision on if you are willing to potentially lose those relationships. So if sacrificing the one relationship for your emotional well-being and your mental health, if that sacrifice is worth the cost of losing that, then I think you make the decision to remove them. And what you have to consider is, after I cut that person out of my life, I have to communicate with the other people that it impacts, establish my clear, firm boundaries with them, and then I just have to hope that they respect it. Because if they don't, I have to remove them as well for not being able to respect my boundaries. Understand with that, here's the takeaway. You do not have control over other people. You have to do what's best for yourself. So make the decision if it feels right to you, if it's going to help your mental health and emotional well-being, make that hard decision and remove them. Have the conversations you need to have to try to maintain the other relationships and to set your boundaries. And then it's out of your hands from there. If they make the decision to not respect your boundaries, you should remove them as well. And that's a hard conversation to have, but if they can't respect your boundaries, that adds to the mental health and emotional well-being and a negative impact on your life. So you have to understand that that part is out of your hands. You're not making that decision to remove them. You're making the decision to remove the one person and then to set clear boundaries and communicate with the other people. After that, it's up to them on how they respond to that. So understand you just don't have the control over what they do in response, but you can control respecting yourself. So stick firm to that boundary and respect yourself and the decision that you make. And then I wanted to just tie this into the last message that I sent to my mom. And that message, I had no intent of receiving a response. Immediately after sending the message, I blocked her. Her phone number, I blocked her on social media. I did not send that message to receive a response. I sent that message for closure for myself. There was a clear message that I needed and wanted to send, and that was to reiterate on all of the conversations that had gone unnoticed. It was a message about the respect factor and the hard line that had been crossed that led to the finally coming to this decision, and the finality of the situation of that this is final. You won't be a part of our lives anymore. And I needed to send that message for myself. I had sent so many messages prior and was always just waiting for a response that I wanted to hear, that would make me feel some kind of resolution in the situation. And I reached the point that I realized that response was not coming. And so this was a hard message to write and to send, and a difficult decision to make. It came at many tears, many conversations with my wife, and just a lot of just draining emotional energy. But I learned so much from it. And I wanted to share it today because I hope that you can learn something from it. I want you to listen to this story, and I want you to evaluate the relationship that is hurting you, that is draining you, that is impacting your mental health. And it's time for you to either have the hard conversation that can hopefully begin the amendment and the repair of that relationship. But if it can't, then I encourage you to do what's best for yourself, for your emotions, for your mental well-being, and remove the toxic relationship from your life. I want to follow that up with, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a therapist. This is simply my story, the way that I went about it, and I think that there is a lot of strength in just talking about it. I think that we can help each other if we open the door of communication and we talk about these difficult things in our lives. And this is a goal-oriented podcast, so why am I going so deep into something so emotional? And That's because relationships should be one of the biggest goals in your life, to improve and foster positive relationships. Having relationships with people you work with family members, with close friends, with your kids, with your spouse, whatever it is, relationships are some of the most important things in life. So it's crucial to talk about when it comes to having goals around your relationships. So I really just want to wish you luck on your journey. If you're going through a toxic relationship, I want to empower you to take something away from this, to apply it to your journey, to remove toxicity from your life, whether it be through improving the relationship or cutting them out. And I just want to tell you that you're not alone. With that being said, I want to leave you with a word of the week on a more positive note. However, this is not a word of the week for you to learn and start to apply to your vocabulary. This is a word of the week to remove from your vocabulary, because I believe that the words we use impact the way in which we act and think. So the word that I want to give you today is trying. Let's say you have a goal you set and you say, I am trying to achieve and accomplish this goal. Let's be specific. Let's say I have a weight loss goal. I'm trying to lose weight. You're not trying. You either are making decisions that help you lose weight or you are not. Let's say you're trying to get a promotion at work. You either are taking the actions that make you favorable for a promotion or you are not. There's not a trying factor when it comes to pursuing and achieving your goals. You don't try to achieve a goal, you either achieve it or you do not achieve it. And that is a direct result of the actions you take every single day. You either take the action to work toward the goal or you do not take the action to work toward your goal. That's a decision that you make, but you don't try. So I encourage you to remove try and trying from your vocabulary and start doing it and taking action towards your goal. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. Thanks for allowing me to just be deep and vulnerable. I really hope that you take something away to apply to your journey. Please comment with your thoughts and questions. Like and subscribe on your listening platform. I really love hearing from you. So let me know what your thoughts are. Join the conversation and let's grow together.